All right, hey everybody, welcome back to Red Dot Forum. My name's Colin McKinley. I'm out here in Alaska today with aerial and automotive photographer extraordinaire, Evan Lewis. Over the past few years, Evan has developed an absolutely insane body of work, photographing private planes and exotic cars all across the United States. His work's been featured in advertisements by Leica USA, and his debut gallery, Ascending Alaska, is opening this week, March 7th at Leica Store Miami. Evan, tell us a little bit about where we are right now and what we're gonna do today.
We're actually on top of a mountain right now. We just touched down in this beautiful Cessna 180 behind me. We got two Super Cubs sitting a little out of frame right now. And today we're gonna be doing some aerial air-to-air photography. So we're gonna go ahead and take this beautiful 180, take some shots out of the window. We got the two Super Cubs that are gonna fly in formation next to us. And we're gonna shoot out over to the Ruth Glacier, which is kind of at the base of Denali, in this beautiful amphitheater area. With some insane cliff faces, so should be pretty cool. And then we're gonna maybe head back over to the Knik region, which is the Knik Glacier. It's a beautiful glacier, just not too far from Palmer, easy flight from Palmer, and do some more air-to-air stuff there. And then, yeah, should be a fun day.
Amazing, let's go do some flying.
Yeah, let's get to it.
Evan, tell me a little bit about how you got into aviation photography.
Yeah, absolutely. So it all started a few years ago. I just graduated from college. It's right around kind of when COVID was going on, and flights were cheap, and I'd always wanted to go and visit Alaska. I've always been one to go on adventures and try to see the world, so I booked that trip from Florida up to Alaska, and came up here, and I didn't really know anybody, but I had just a very small connection with a pilot up here. His name was Michael, and he was nice enough to take me up in a Cessna 172. And if you've never been to Alaska, it's just home to some of the most insane, vast landscapes. And so, yeah, there was plenty to photograph. I was very excited for the opportunity. And so we flew around for a little bit. I took some pictures, and essentially, Michael had been renting an aircraft from this company called Blue River Aviation. And I didn't know at the time, but Michael was actually good friends with the owner. And he basically the next day was like, you gotta check out these photos. These are super cool. And so I was happy, of course, to share those photos with the owner. And I cut to the next day, and we're taking two Piper Super Cubs, which are just small backcountry aircraft, out to the glaciers, and we started taking pictures, and I just fell in love.
Tell me a little bit about the techniques that you're using when you're shooting up air-to-air in the plane, shooting other planes.
So my background is actually automotive photography. So I kind of adapted a lot of techniques that I learned in the automotive realm to aviation photography. And especially air-to-air, you're dealing with moving objects, right? So you have multiple objects flying close to each other, moving through space. And so, you know, one of the techniques that I use a lot in automotive photography is often referred to like as a rolling shot, right? So it would be a photograph of a vehicle driving, and essentially I just have to translate that to a three-dimensional plane as opposed to a road, which would be like a two-dimensional plane. So essentially I do a low shutter speed, and when you're doing an automotive-based rolling shot, if you will, you know, you're getting that shutter speed low so you can have more movement of the ground around the vehicle. So it makes the vehicle look like it's moving faster. Well, in aviation photography, you're not necessarily trying to get the ground moving by the airplane really quick, although in certain scenarios that can be a cool effect. My goal with doing a low shutter speed is to get the propeller blade of the aircraft, assuming you're shooting something that has a propeller, which most of these aircraft do, to do a full rotation in the actual photograph.
Right.
So in that amount of time that you're actually taking that shot, which, if you're shooting one of these planes, typically I'm shooting around 1/60th of a second when we're in the air. If you get the lighting right, it creates a prop disc, which just, I guess, would be something that translates to what you'd see with your eyes, because your eyes don't really pick up the blade spinning, and especially when you're flying, you don't see the blade, right? It's moving.
Right.
So I think it's just more natural to try to capture that. Some other techniques and things that help a lot when you're doing air-to-air photography, having good image stabilization, which thankfully the Leicas have a great image stabilization system, which allows me to get the shutter speed nice and low, especially if it's a little turbulent or something like that. That's a huge help. So just trying to get the camera as stable as possible. And another thing that is also really beneficial is continuous shooting on the Leicas, which now is super easy with the SL3 because we have the CFE cards, which write super fast. You can do much longer bursts without the camera basically backing up and needing to write to the card. So having a CFE card is a hugely beneficial for that as well. Kind of the last kind of final thing I would touch on is it's really important to have a good CPL mounted on your camera, or circular polarizer.
Sure.
For those who aren't familiar. Just to kind of eliminate reflections, especially if you're flying over glaciers or open water, just turning that CPL to get that extra depth, or kind of eliminating some of those reflections or getting the sky a little more blue, makes a huge difference. Those are what I would say are kind of some of the basic techniques that you'd need to consider if you're going to do aviation photography for the first time, or at least air-to-air photography in particular.
Sure. So, Evan, when we first met, you were shooting mostly on the SL2. Now you've upgraded to the SL3. Tell me about some of the lenses that you like to use. What's the lens on your camera right now? What are you using when you're up in the air? Tell me about your kit a little bit.
This lens is actually very special to me. I really like this lens. Although I don't typically use it for aviation photography, it can be used on the ground for some really cool effects. This is the 50mm Knik Deluxe f1.0. So you get this just insane bokeh, and it's fantastic for getting details of aircraft or anything really. But I actually took some really cool photos with this and a Cessna 170 that was a polished aluminum finish, and it came out so magical. I was really happy using this lens. And however, my go-to lens for aviation photography is my 24 to 90mm.
Of course.
It's just such a versatile lens. You can go so wide, and a lot of the times, if we get really talented pilots, I like to get the planes really close together in the air, and just having that wide range, but then zooming it all the way out to 90 if need be. If the pilots can't get as close in different scenarios. So yeah, that lens is definitely my go-to. I wouldn't get in a plane without it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Plus the image stabilization too, paired with the in-body stabilization.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that lens just does it all. It really does.
So when you're up in the air, how do you communicate to the other people involved what the kind of shot is that you're trying to get? It's loud up there, you've got multiple pilots, I guess, on headsets. How do you make it all come together?
Sure, yeah. Communication is very important when you're doing air-to-air photography. And that goes from, before we're even off the ground to in the air. So we typically have a pre-flight briefing where everybody kind of talks about what's the best safety procedures in various scenarios. Who's going to break off if somebody gets too close or out of sight or whatever. Sure. Once we're in the air, I'll have the headset on, and I'll use the push to talk to the other pilots. And one of the things that happens in the pre-flight briefing is that the pilots determine a frequency that they're going to talk on. So they have the radios, they switch them to the frequency that only the pilots involved in our shoot are on, and then I can use the push to talk to tell the pilots what to do. a lot of those communications will involve, you know, telling the pilot, you know, what heading to fly, or, you know, say, hey, like, can you come, you know, to our 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock position. A lot of the times I'm also telling the pilots, hey, get as close as you're comfortable. You'll hear me say that all the time, get as close as you're comfortable. Obviously, we want everybody to be safe, don't want to push anybody, but having the planes close to the lens, I think, is something that, you know, probably separates my work a little bit from other people. I feel like typically a lot of these formation shots are more telephoto-y. I like bringing the planes like nice and close. I think it just brings the photo alive, and I think I feel like, you know, maybe I can reach out and touch the plane, you know, just having that wide field of view is really cool. And you know, a big aspect of that is just having some really talented pilots that are comfortable getting in close together, comfortable getting in formation. It's very stressful on the pilots. I'm always talking to them, and yeah, it's a very high concentration activity. Also, one of the techniques and one of the communications that I'll tell the pilots is, a lot of the times we'll fly a large kind of orbit or circle around a certain point. So I'll say, hey, we're going to do you know, a very slow left banked turn, and we're going to complete a 360-degree circle. And what that does is, you know, if they can fly coordinated next to us in formation, then as we're flying that large kind of circle around a certain point, I will get all the different lighting scenarios that are going to happen within that circle, and then also I'm going to have the ability to get all the different backdrops, right, that are possible within that area. So then, one, that gives me a lot of options as far as, you know, everything goes, but two, then I can say, ooh, I really like that backdrop, or I really like that lighting. Let's fly that heading,
Right.
And you know, we'll continue on that path until there's a mountain in the way or something like that, you know. So yeah, so that would be kind of the basis of communications.
It's very cool. I think people can really see it in your photos. People can just tell the how close you are to the action. You know, you feel like a participant, not an observer, when you're that close with a wide angle lens. You're not looking at this from far away, but you're really involved and immersed in the scene that you're photographing.
Absolutely, yeah.
So tell me what it's like flying in the plane with the windows or the doors open in the wintertime.
Well, it's one thing to be flying with the windows or the doors open at all. I mean, you know, as soon as that door comes open, you're just getting blasted by wind. But you know, it's part of the thrill. It's part of the, you know, it's the same thing when you're doing a rolling shot out of a car. Again, the speeds are a little higher typically. You know, there's multiple different types of aircraft. I've really done most of my shooting out of two kinds, which would be, you know, something like a Cessna 172, which typically has a just kind of window on either side that opens, you know, vertically, and essentially stays up because of the airflow going under the wing. So once you're in flight, you know, very carefully just open that hatch, and then, you know, all the air comes in, but that's going to give me the clear kind of view to shoot out of the window. I try to get my camera right up close to the window, right up close to the opening, so I have a clear view out of the window, but I don't like to stick it out of the window completely, because then I get a ton of drag and it's almost impossible to get a stable shot, of course. So, and then in the alternate type of aircraft, something like this beautiful Piper Super Cub behind me, basically have a whole side door that opens all the way up. So you have a window that goes up, and then the bottom part of the door goes down. So you have this massive wide field of view. And it's kind of the same deal. I just try to keep it out of the airstream, but a lot of the times I'm kind of like turning backwards, kind of shooting back at the other aircraft if we're doing like a head-on shot. But you're getting blasted, and I will say in the wintertime, it can be pretty brutal. My typical method in the winter is to basically take photos until I can't feel my hands anymore. And then I'll be like, hey, I need a break to warm up my hands. And that's even with gloves on. I mean, there's just nothing you can do with sub-zero temperatures, you know, blasting through your gloves. I mean, it makes your hands very cold very quick. So yeah, just shoot until my hands hurt, pull them back in, warm them up, and then go again.
Totally, and the shots speak for themselves. I mean, you can see it in the work. It's just, I mean, it's astounding.
Thank you.
All right, so Evan, last thing, tell me a little bit about this show you have opening up in Miami this week. I know you're really excited about it, and so are all the pilots and the other people who are involved in the project.
Yeah, absolutely. The show is going to be called Ascending Alaska. And it basically encompasses a lot of my work that I produced up here in Alaska, and it's surrounding or focused mainly on unique forms of transportation up here. And so kind of going into, obviously it's going to be aviation focused. There's a lot of shots that are from the air,
Sure.
a lot of air-to-air stuff involved, but also kind of going back into my roots of doing automotive photography. I've met some really cool people up here with some very unique vehicles, and I just thought that would be cool to share. A lot of people travel. People travel all over the world all the time, but I feel like the thing that is kind of forgotten is the transportation, right? It's like, how did I get here? Oh, I flew here. It's no big deal. Well, in Alaska, I mean, transportation is a way of life, essentially. I mean, there's so many pilots up here, and you really, if you want to have access, you really have to be a pilot. And so I kind of wanted to bring some light to what it means to be a backcountry pilot in Alaska and be able to experience this incredible state. Yeah, that's going to be the show. It's on March 7th, and it's been a lot of work, but we're going to have really, really cool setup there. We're going to have 14 large metal prints. So it'll be something that I don't think Leica Store Miami's seen before.
Amazing, very exciting. Well, let's get back out and do some more flying. We got more pictures to take and more exciting times ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Colin.
Wow, what an amazing day of flying. Evan, thanks so much for taking me out. That was really amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. It was my pleasure. Yeah, we kind of had an unexpected turn of events there. Right as we thought we were heading back, we ended up, Blue River Aviation ended up taking this gentleman out to fly his hot air balloon out on Knik Glacier. We ended up going out there and photographing that, and that was just such an amazing end to an just unbelievable day of photography and flying.
Totally. Unexpected. Really, really cool. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. Make sure if you don't already, check out red.forum.com for more Leica news, reviews, tips and tricks, and more. And until then, we'll see you next time.